I'm going to talk today more on Krishna and the path of devotion rather than like yesterday. We had a talk at Leisure World, continuing knowledge. What was that? Lifelong knowledge, lifelong learning. Yeah, so today we will discuss about lifelong devotion. It's interesting because while Krishna is depicted as dancing in Brindavan with the Gopis and going to war with Kamsa and helping Arjuna to find the battle of Kurukshetra and so on, it's one place he assumes the role of a guru, which is in the Bhagavad Gita. There he becomes Jagadguru. I mean, a real Jagadguru, not a human being. So, in that role, he teaches Arjuna, and the basic principle is that there are different approaches to the truth. Gita is an entire, like a swaras of music. It has all chapters dealing with different ways of approaching the spirit. Starting with Arjuna Vishada Yoga, which I think is the level in which most people are. Gita, the chapter on Arjuna's confusion, insecurity, sorrow, and so on. From there, gently he leads Arjuna up to knowledge, to Sankhya, to karma. So each chapter, Vyasa notes at the end of each chapter that it's a yoga. Then in the 12th you come to Bhakti, devotion. And then you go on and on. Very many people wonder, why is Krishna talking about Bhakti only in the 12th chapter? Why can't he do it in the beginning? It would have been easier. Why should we go through this whole? If you look carefully, you will notice that if Krishna had probably talked about devotion in the first chapter, Arjuna would have said, hey, this is boring, let's do something else. Or teach me how to get out of sorrow first. I'm in trouble. So he leads him gently. So wait till the 12th chapter, because you will notice, up to the 9th chapter, Arjuna and Krishna seem to be on equal terms, talking to each other like friends. Somebody is riding the chariot, someone is controlling the reins, and they are good friends and they are also relatives in a way, on equal terms. Krishna says something, Arjuna asks questions, and then in the 9th chapter, Krishna changes his note and starts talking something which Arjuna cannot understand. He suddenly says, among the munis, I am Kapila. Among the immovables, Achalas, I am the Himachala. Among the mountains, I am Meru. Among the Vedas, I am Samaveda. So for a second, Arjuna is completely confused, taken aback. This was a guy who was sitting and talking to me all this time. I was asking questions. Sometimes he said, do this, and I said, I can't do it. Can you help me out? And so on. And suddenly he says, I am the Meru, and I am the Himachala, and I am Samaveda. What is this happening here? Which means what? It's in the 10th chapter, that Arjuna's so-called sure shot rational mind is being broken. Because till then everything was 1 + 1 is equal to 2. Here things are changing, and Arjuna is beginning to, what is this guy saying? He was sitting with me till now. So what's happening is very slowly, the little, we call this what we all say, oh, I have a very rational mind. I have my own rational framework, which is good. I understand. But that infinite, which represents Krishna here, cannot be found with that finite little mind. And that what we call rational is very limited. I won't go into Vedanta, I promise. But I couldn't help saying a few things. So, what happened here is that he is breaking down his theory about things. If you need to look at that, which is beyond the senses, beyond the Panchendriyas, one needs to understand that all our knowledge is limited. Now here he is breaking out into saying things which shakes up Arjuna's so-called logical mind, and he begins to wonder what he's saying now. Starting. Then in the 11th chapter there is something called Vishwarupa Darsana, which shocks Arjuna out of his wits. He sees there is this man who was sitting in front of him, this Devaki's little boy, has suddenly transformed into something, a tremendous energy, like a black hole going in and out. And then his so-called judgment and reasoning, which is dependent on the 5 senses, is broken. He says, I cannot understand. I think I cannot understand. I can't touch that. My finite mind is weak. It can't approach that. It's the beginning of bhakti. So immediately after he shatters Arjuna's surety and certainty, then begins the 12th chapter called Bhakti Yoga. It's interesting because people say if the Supreme Being is all-pervading Brahman, and if it's also in our hearts as a spark, why do we worship? Usual question. The reason is given in the 12th chapter when Krishna tells Arjuna that while you can conceive of the Supreme Being as the formless Almighty and so on, human minds are very attached to name and form, and therefore it's easier to link with the Supreme Being while depending on name and form. And if it is the Supreme Being, then it must be everywhere. So why not in a temple? You can say, why not outside? Okay, fine, that's exactly what is okay if you want to do that. But it's also here in the name and form. And human beings are naturally inclined to name and form. We all like our name and form, at least our own form, don't we? Morning before coming here, how many of you didn't look at the mirror and see how the hairstyle is? So we are attached to Nama and Rupa. And therefore, it's not so easy. You can philosophically speculate, but it's not so easy to fix your attention. So if you have something which you can actually do with your hands, alankara, ringing of the bells, showing of the lights, beautifully decorated, then what happens? The mind which is naturally attuned to name and form attaches itself to it. Then that seva leads one to the higher levels of devotion. Right. Having said this, I want to tell you a little story. There was another, we have a long nose, Sindoor falls on it. There was another M who lived many years ago in Calcutta. He wrote a book called The Gospel of Ramakrishna. And he was a headmaster in a school, so he could visit Ramakrishna only on Sundays. But in the beginning, he didn't want to see this man at all. So once, apparently, he had a problem, which we all married people know. I'm a married man myself. He fought with his wife. And then he decided, and some of his friends told him, if you want a little bit of peace of mind, go to the garden of Dakshineshwar, Rani Rasmani. It's a beautiful place. It's on the banks of the Hooghly River, which the Bengalis call the Ganga. And if you're lucky, you might meet a Paramahamsa there. So, even otherwise, it's okay. So he set out on a horse buggy. Halfway through, he thought, I'm not going to Dakshineshwar. He didn't like that Paramahamsa business. So he said, he was from the Brahmo Samaj. In those days, all the youth of Bengal were part of the Brahmo Samaj. So he thought, I'll go somewhere else. But what happened was, when the horse cart reached the front of the Dakshineshwar gardens, the axle broke. So he had to get down. So he got down, he saw the garden. He said, okay, let's go in there. So he went in there. And he was appreciating the garden. He could see the river from there. And then a gentleman came towards him, wearing a red bordered Bengali dhoti in Bengali style. You know how it is, the pallav becomes so long you have to fold it and put it in your pocket. And you must have seen Sri Ramakrishna's picture, mostly with beard. But in those days, he was clean shaved and very fair and shining face. And he had just eaten some pan, so the lips were red. And he was wearing polished leather jutis. This gentleman came to him and asked him. So when he came near, M asked him, do you know any Paramahamsa living here? So he smiled and said, he said, I don't know, but sit down, let's have a chat. He sat down. And then he asked him, you are young, educated Bengal. That's how they used to refer. Do you believe in God with form or without form? So, Mahendranath Gupta, M, said, my God is a formless supreme reality, Brahma Samaj. So he said, okay. So this formless supreme God of yours, does he live in some heaven somewhere or is he everywhere? All pervading. He said he's everywhere, he's all pervading. Okay? Then he showed him the temple of Kali there. He said, so there's the image of the mother there? Yeah, he could see it. So if your God is all pervading, he must also be inside that, right? Can you take it off from there? You can't. So I worship God this way, with the mother. M was stunned because he was a professor and nobody had talked to him on these terms. So then what happened? Not the end of the story. He left saying that I won't come back here. What should I do with this man? He left. Then on a Sunday, Sri Ramakrishna was sitting and cracking jokes and laughing with the boys who surrounded him. One of the boys became Swami Vivekananda, somebody became Brahmananda and so on. Those days there were young boys sitting in the room. If you go to Dakshineshwar, you can see the room where they sat. The temple gate is on the right side. People used to blame him, saying that this guy is not teaching anything, he's just joking with them, giving them rasgullas. What is it teaching? Spoiling the youth. Anyway, so they were sitting and talking, and everybody referred to him as Thakur. So Thakur started telling them a story about a peacock who went to a temple, and the priest mixed opium in the food. So the peacock drank it. And then every day at the same time, peacock used to come because of the opium. To take addiction. Good addiction. So he said that, and then he said, the peacock is going to come now. So they thought, what is it? Sometimes he said crazy things, so they just dismissed it. Chalo. Which peacock? There was no peacock there. In 10 minutes, Mahendranath Gupta entered, and Thakur said in a whisper to Narendra, the peacock has come. So then you know what happened afterwards. He could go only on Sundays. So all the description in the Gospel of Ramakrishna is what he noted down on Sundays. And then Sri Ramakrishna approved him as the scribe. Because when another disciple of his, Swami Akhandananda, who was the youngest, started imitating him and taking notes, he said, throw it into the Ganga. You're not writing. But he was allowed to write. That is the M who lived 100 years ago.